Yes, hello everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm just happy that I got in after 10 minutes of trying to get in. I have no idea what any of my laptop, iPad, or my phone was doing today. But I'm so happy to see everyone here, and we are going to discuss something that I love, something that is near and dear to me as a creative, as a multi-passionate creative, and it's something that gets me through my commute to and from work every day. I have introduced my students to it. They have now started listening to it, and it is the amazing world of podcasting. Yes, that thing that you listen to while you're cleaning the kitchen, the dog, the kids, all of those things, and it opens your mind. It gives us a refreshing look at different topics. You hear different voices, and for me, it always gives me a different angle, and I'm able to go, I didn't think about it like that, or I would never think about it like that. That's totally stupid. Either way, it allows us to have I'm still at school. I don't know what all the noises are in my new school. I don't think it was a fire alarm. I don't. I'm so sorry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. The aliens are here. Y'all, I'm in a Twilight Zone, but that's a whole nother book that's another podcast. I'm going to be quiet, and I would like my guests to introduce themselves. I'm going to start off in alphabetical order because I'm a school teacher, and what else would I do? And let me see. I think Dr. Anderson, that would be you. All right.
I do my part. Again, hi, for those people who met me just a little while ago. I am Dr. Natasha Anderson. You can call me Dr. Tasha, most people do, or the Nerdy STEM Queen. I go by either. My podcast is Stemming and Stilettos, and it's a celebration of women of color in STEM, and they get to tell their stories, and what we know is a safe place. And that's really the important piece, one of the important pieces of the podcast, because these are women who have largely been marginalized in their spaces, but they continue to do the work. And so they can talk about their story and the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they give advice to the next generation, which speaks directly to my purpose as the CEO of Smart STEM. My sole purpose is to reproduce myself. I'm a Black woman engineer, and I work really hard to see more minorities go into the STEM space. So that is my work, and this is one small part of it. Glad to be here to talk about podcasting and how I've used it to highlight their stories, but also how it can be used to be a major part of how we educate our kids.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to put it out there. I've been working out lately because school has started back for us, and I've been making sure I'm walking and running. And I've been listening to all 3 podcasts. And I'm telling you guys, this has been, and I'm not a STEM, I'm an ELA, strictly literature and just literacy and all of that. But now I'm like, oh, maybe we can do an experiment if we're talking about this, or how can I go connect with the science teacher about this? So I am totally appreciative. Now, I do not like messing up names, and I've been practicing. I feel like I'm going to mess it up. So I'm going to practice it now. Carlos Aponte. I got it right. Yes, yes. Please introduce yourself and tell us about your podcast.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Dr. Anderson, for the work you do. I appreciate you. Our podcast. So it's the We Love Philly podcast. My students and we interview different nonprofit organizations in the city of Philadelphia, and we create, using the podcast, online content that they can use on social media, they can put on their website, and it's all part of the We Love Philly curriculum that we go over in class. And it gives students an opportunity to find their voice, to learn how to read better, and a bunch of other different skills that we can get into. Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And I love your podcast. And one of the things about all 3 podcasters, they're all different and they're all excellent in what they do. And I love yours because yours comes from the angle that I'm trying. I tried in my old school, I'm gonna try here again, is that it's student centered and student led. And you're like the moderator behind the scenes. And that's great because podcasting has so many jobs that we can prepare our students for. I know I'm in a group now and they're always looking for a producer. And then I see the salary and I'm like, wait, that's more than that's double what I make. Like, how can I transition? So I'm going to go to our third amazing podcaster, Dr. Hudson. Introduce yourself and tell us about your podcast, please.
Hey, y'all. Hey, so I'm Dr. Hudson. I'm Dr. Evangeline. Dr. Eve is really what I go by. And I'm the host of the First Gen Lounge, which is a podcast where I'm celebrating the first generation college student graduates and their identity. So how are you navigating life after college as someone who was first gen? We talk about all things life and entrepreneurship. So it can be navigating relationships or what I'm going to do with this job, or I think I want to start a business, but this is crazy. But I just love being able to create a space and a community for those who have been able to overcome the challenges of getting through higher education, who are now in the real world, but still need the support to continue to thrive with this particular and very specific identity that isn't so obvious, but definitely is a push to continue to support many of those who come from very diverse backgrounds across genders, race, socioeconomic class, and et cetera, et cetera. So stop it there, but thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation.
And thank you so much. And yes, I did listen to yours. I'm not a first gen, but I work with first gen middle schoolers who we would like if they choose to go and attend college. And through different organizations, community organizations, we do sponsor a student, or sometimes my girlfriends and I are like, hey, when we go back to the dorm, to the college for homecoming, we go to our old dorm rooms and we in a Baptist church, it's called a handshake like this, is when you put money in somebody's hand and we knock on the door and whichever female, or sometimes I try and find my old roommate and she and I will go, and whoever is what side of the room, and we put some money in their hand. Or we say, what's your Cash App? Because that's what the young kids do now. And that's something that I've learned, because you do need that money. You do need that $20, that $25 for gas or pizza. But I have learned a lot because I did not understand. I knew that we took a trip to Walmart and it spent $600 more to decorate my room, but I thought everybody knew that. And as I've learned and especially listen to your podcast and others, that's something that I have to make sure we do trunk parties and we get everybody what they need and then continue to check on them. So we have a poll, and while we're getting the poll up, I forgot to tell you about my podcast. My name is Benita G. I'm the Education Concierge, and my podcast is the Education Concierge Podcast. While I'm speaking, go ahead and fill out the poll. The first one is about how do you identify? All right, ed tech industry. I see y'all in the house. Thank you. We're going to do about 10 more seconds. Oh, you're on it. I was like, yes. Who's working with me today? There you go. Okay. All right. So we have students and we have members of ed tech. I don't get the vote, but I am a member of, I'm an educator. So we'll go there. All right. We're going to go to question number 2. How often do you listen to podcasts? This is a good one.
And we actually have the next couple of questions grouped together. So feel free to respond to 1, 2, 3 on here. There are 3 questions. So feel free to respond to all.
Thank you. And this is something I just learned how to do through you guys. I'll say, oh, wait, I can put them all together. The next one says, what platforms do you use to listen to podcasts? And this one it's multiple choice. So you can pick as many as you use. And then the last one is just us being curious some more. And what topics are the majority of your podcast about? And you can do multiple choice again. Let me see. And we're going to close this in about 20 more seconds.
Oh, we closed it. We had about 20 minutes. We had most of the people responded. So
That's okay.
Can you see the results?
Let me see. I can. Do I need to hit stop sharing?
Nope. Everyone can see the results now.
All right, so we're going to go back up to the top. And I love this. How often do you listen to podcasts? We have one person that says never. Welcome to the podcast community. Woo! I'm so excited you're here. Seldom, often. I would be all the time. Like when I say to y'all all the time, I don't even know. The only reason I know real songs is because I also have TikTok. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's a TikTok song. And they were like, no, that's a real song. I'm like, oh, my bad. I'm so sorry. So thank you. Podcasts are normally about Philadelphia. Okay. And I saw some comments. I'm going to go there as soon as I finish the poll. I love the comments and the questions. Platforms. So we have Google, Spotify, Apple, and iHeart. That's interesting because a lot of people didn't know iHeart actually has podcasts, but they do now. Google, of course, Anchor is where we do a lot of, I know for me, I use Anchor to produce my podcast, and then it goes to all of the platforms. Apple, I think Apple just changed it from subscribe to follow. So you might have to go back in and make sure that you follow your favorite podcaster, the 4 of us that are on here today. We're your favorites now. And Podbean. Podbean is something that I've also just noticed and started using actually the other day. All right. And then our last question, what topics are the majority? I love this. Education. Yay, is the first one. Technology, sports, religion, self-help, music, and nobody put money. That's like my top 2. It's like education, money, self-help. I need to know what to do with my little bit of teacher salary. When I get that 50 cents, like, what do I do with it? Like, how should I invest it? Thank you for sharing, and thank you for answering our poll. I appreciate that. I'm gonna go quickly into the chat, and then we're gonna start interviewing our guests. So don't forget to go into the chat. Everyone has posted how you can connect to their podcasts. Charlie says the music podcasts I listen to are just recordings of DJ sets from the UK pirate radio. I love it. Look, pirate radio, if y'all don't know what pirate radio is, it's what my generation calls underground. That's basically what it is. And so it's the same thing, but they have amazing, and you're right, they have amazing DJ sets on there. My podcast is usually about Philadelphia Eagles and going to the Super Bowl this year. No, because I'm straight up Steelers, Pittsburgh baby all day. And grew up in a Washington football team house. So I'm the outcast child. Was using SoundCloud for stuff I listened to until Android Auto came along. Yes, my SoundCloud doesn't work. All the Eagles fans are supporting. So I love it because Philly is in the house because we love Philly. And it's okay. I do. I love Philly. All right. So I'm going to get started, and I'm going to open the floor to any of our podcasters, our audience members. Anytime you want to ask a question, raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat and I will read it out. But the first question I want to say is, why podcasting? It's that simple. Why podcasting? And any 3 of you can jump in and let us know. But why did you start a podcast? How did you go about doing this? What was the reasoning?
Okay, I'll go first. Because it was kind of twofold. One, for me, it was safe. And because, a podcast you listen to, you don't have to dress or look a certain way or present yourself. It's you, the mic, and another person, if that's the way your setup is. So there's safety there. And I really wanted to provide my guests with an opportunity to know and understand and feel that they were safe, and that what they told me, they could tell me as much or as little as they wanted to, because I wasn't here for exploitation. I was here to support, uplift, and to have them be secure enough to feel free to tell their story. So that's why podcasting really works for my audience.
Thank you. Any other panelists?
So for me, it was scratching my radio itch. I actually went to school for a degree in mass communications. I thought I was going to be a radio host. And I'm so sorry, my dog just intruded. So he's in playing with his toy. Oh my gosh, I'm really so sorry. So I'm gonna make this quick. So for me, can we come back to me, please, so I can put him out? I'm so sorry, y'all. So I can't believe this happened.
That's fine. Go ahead.
For me, it provided the most skills that could be acquired by the students. So they can learn, specifically with our podcast, they're interviewing people. So they have to research, they have to come up with interview questions. They have to learn how to speak on the microphone, edit the podcast. There's an amazing app called The Script that actually I use to help them learn how to read, because they have to focus on what is going on as the script is going, and it highlights the words, and you really can't focus on anything else or you're going to miss it. Podcasting also forces them to use more of their attention span to actually listening. They're learning how to listen. It was just like the full umbrella of just every skill imaginable. And at the same time, a lot of my student population, they are still working on building their self-esteem, and podcasting was something that didn't put them on camera right away, and it could work and build that skill up and not be, it's sort of like the conversation aspect of it, let them put their guard down a little more than like a camera and a microphone right in their face.
Okay, Dr. Hudson, we're going to circle back around to you.
Okay, I need one of those little gates, the baby gates, because the door just came open. I was like, oh my gosh. But for me, it's again the scratching the itch. I went to school thinking that I was going to be a radio host. That was the dream, and then it's like coming back to it, but also getting to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, when I want to do it. But then there's a component of, I mean, look at my population. I work with a lot of people who are in the higher education industry. And so that, you know, it's accessible even for those who do listen. So if you are first gen, you can download a show, you know, on your iPad or on your iPhone, or, you know, get to it, you know, later on your computer if you need to at home, and be able to tune into the show. But also thinking about those who typically do listen to podcasts are often those who are more educated. So in an education space, it makes sense that, you know, if he or she who may be a college president, you know, I want to get in front of them, they can listen to my show on the way to work or while they're, you know, running at the gym in the morning. So for my audience as a whole, it really worked out. But also when I work with those who are in, you know, the higher ed space and doing things like looking for activities for their students. So it was a very intentional space to go into. Hey, how about podcasts? And now you can have some very interesting conversations in your first gen communities around these particular topics. And it's really easy for students to get to, not like a YouTube. So you have to sit and watch it. You can listen to it on the bus, because if I'm first gen, I may need to take public transportation, right? Or, you know, if I'm a first gen graduate and I'm on the bus still, you know, it still just makes it a very accessible thing that you can keep in your hand, that you can play back as well. Much easier and digest, but also it's really intimate. Think about the fact that I have in my AirPods, right? A lot of people put on, you know, headphones, or they're doing something, like you said earlier, Benita, you're in the shower or you're, you know, washing clothes, you're doing something and you feel like you're with these people. And my goal at the core was to create community. So what better way to create community than to really be in conversation. So although you're not an active part of it, you still feel like, I was sitting there and I was listening and I was like, girl, and it's like, you get that from a podcast. So it just really made it a very no-brainer thing for me. And it's had many, many layers to why. So I had many reasons to why, and that's why I went for it.
Thank you, all three. And I have to say, I was at a friend's house and he told Google to play something. And I was like, wait, your Google will play stuff? He was like, yeah, I listen to podcasts. He said, so he literally was like, hey, Google, play the latest podcast. I was sitting there, my Google's about to do it. I was sitting there like, he was like, how are you listening? I was like, I just been carrying the phone around the house. And he was like, you have a Google? And I was like, yeah. He was like, and I was like, so now y'all, this is, I will tell you, I wake up in the morning and be like, hey, Google, play such and such and such latest of this episode. And I'm like, now I know. Thank you, Tracy. I'm not the only one. And if you have, what's the other thing? Alexa, is it Alexa? If you have, she does the same thing, because they're cousins. And so Siri and Alexa are cousins, and Google and all of them. And so they will play the latest episode, as long as it's in your, for me, it has to be in my Google podcast, but they will play it, or my Spotify, they will play it. So just wanted to let you know, that's another case when you're in the house. there are podcasts for children. So if you have little bitties, if you are, school hasn't started, if you are homeschooling, whatever you're doing, there's a podcast for you. And that's something that I love. So this takes me into my next question. My next question is, how do you find guests for your podcast?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Anderson. Okay. The way we find guests is by volunteering. So I speak with a lot of different podcasters, and I know that's a struggle. And when they ask me how I do it, I'm like, go and work and volunteer for the person, and they're going to want to return that favor to you. So our motto at We Love Philly is give love, get love. So we always start with the leadership role and giving and extending that olive branch to people. And we do that through volunteerism. And then when we volunteer with them, we're like, hey, we would also love to amplify your voice and let everyone know in the city what you're doing. Would you like to come on our podcast? And they're usually really excited. And yeah, that's how we get guests.
So I started off I just tapped my friends. Like, listen, girl, you're going to be on this podcast episode tomorrow at 5:30, right? But now it's a year and a half later. I actually have people who slide into my DMs and say, hey, I want to be a guest on your show. They send me their information and I and I get to choose, which is wonderful, because, it felt like this was never going to happen. So yeah, you guys, I am a pro and a master. I'm not saying that these always work, but I have a template for sending out, I see wonderful women on LinkedIn or on my Instagram, or like I'm in their circle of people, but like we're not necessarily friends. Of calling, not even calling, but of writing an email and saying, hey, I think you would be a perfect guest for my show. And here's what my show is about. Here are links to certain shows. Here's where we can schedule a beginning conversation about it. If you have any additional questions about what it means to be on a podcast, what my expectations are, all of those things. So it is, I don't think that there's a one size fit all method to get guests on your show. And then, I guess another question I guess we could ask is like, should you have guests? I've gone back and forth with that one also, because it can be difficult, especially since this is an auditory exercise, to sort of distinguish between who's who and what's what, especially if there's like 3, 4, 5 people on it. So those are options, things that you need to consider if you're trying to figure out if guests are what you want or what you need as a part of your podcast.
I can tell off of what you just said, even with the guest thing, knowing the reason for your show, because I think part of it is some guests want to come and be on your show for their exposure, but they don't want to expose your podcast. I'm just going to be very honest about that. And that's something that I've struggled with more recently. But to answer the question, right, to or not to have guests, before with me was reaching out and, like I said, tapping on the homegirl shoulder, like, are you first gen? Do you know somebody who's first gen? And the people start, such and such and such and such is. So it became a whole, oh my goodness, everybody's first gen. And then it became, I had enough people back in December of last year. So this is where I struck gold. I was in a few rooms on Clubhouse, if you all are familiar with the app, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for people who are first gen, and I'm actually booked. I've been booked with shows from February through January of next year. Like all of my shows already scheduled. So I've had, several interviews and people to come and just share. So now they're just kind of, when's my show coming? I'm like, maybe December. But it's really just one of those things where Clubhouse is very auditory, of course, right? That's why we love it. So if you're looking for guests, it's a really great space. But outside of that, people still do slide in my DMs. And I'm like, if you're fine with waiting to 2022, we can have that conversation and maybe record in December, right? So I'm loving that I'm ahead of the curve right now, which is great. But then the thing is, having to reschedule, scheduling it all, dogs, coming into the meetings and wanting to be a part of the conversations. But even in terms of the recording piece, what things are your guests dealing with, even if it's children or a thunderstorm that may challenge having guests on your show. but to find them, it can be incredibly easy. And putting out the call on LinkedIn, because all the family shows up when you ask on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I love it. And it is different if you're doing solo shows or you're doing guests and interviewing. So I would taking it to there. And I think Dr. Henderson, you touched on something I was about to talk about, technology. Like the technology, it's ed tech takeover, the technology. Where did you start? And actually, Carlos, I want you to start first because I know being a public school teacher, being in an environment where, like, I can't, if I show y'all my class right now, we have open house tomorrow, you be like, girl, you about to do a Cinderella. Yes, my room looks like the pumpkin right now. And I need to be ready by 4 o'clock before the parents get here. But I know being a public school teacher, I was able to get a grant to start the podcast for my students. So they gave us $300 and I was able to go get the microphones, the mixer, even a little stipend if we needed it to, not a stipend, a monetary thank you, that's the word, for whomever was coming on to be our guest to interview. And then some training, we were able to get some, we used Descript also. So I was able to get the holders to put the iPads up on. So, you know, they're not looking down, or a holder for their phones. But that was because I was just lucky enough to be talking to someone I said, I have a podcast. I want to start one with kids. And she said, I know an organization that has money. They don't know they're going to do it. You apply and I'm going to tell them they're going to do it. And so if you could tell me, how did you do with the ed tech, the technology and the financing of the technology? And any advice you have as an ed tech and a podcaster?
Yeah, now that I think about it, it started as just like a unit project that we did in 2017. And I think I used Anchor and I had no experience with it. I taught it to myself maybe like a week before. And then once we started to build and do it and I saw how much they liked it, then it was hard to try to convince administration about podcasting because it was like 2017 and I feel like they were just like blowing up. I mean, they were around, but like in the general, whatever. But I bought a Zoom recorder. We used to take it around with us when we volunteered and we would stick it on the middle of the table and get all the static. I didn't know about Descript, didn't exist yet. I would kind of only let the students edit it who were really into it, because back then we used Adobe and it was just like you had to watch the wave lines and I couldn't hold students' attention that long to like measure a wave line to when the came in. So that was fun, but most of it just came out of pocket and I just taught myself. And then once the success came, then I could go to administration and go, hey, we need this. These are the skills. This is the curriculum I already wrote up on it. Do you want to use this curriculum for some of your other teachers? And then it was like, yeah, this guy's just doing it without us. So yeah, go support him. So yeah, I just took the leap and then it all worked out.
I feel like I was much the same way. I started on Anchor because it was free. Didn't know what I was doing at all. And actually, before I knew about an anchor, and I put that in quotation marks because I was literally like, what is an anchor and why do we need it? I just had a microphone that I had bought at a garage sale. And I was like, okay, let me just, talk into this thing and see what's going to happen. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, let me do it, So let me, I mean, you guys, we just met today, but what you should know about me is like, when I commit, I commit. So like, I'm all in to do a thing. So I took a deep dive into podcast editing, into the best microphone. And if I needed I needed the noise cancellation, all of that kind of stuff. What are the best options? Do I want to upload my episodes every week? Do I want to hold them it was like all of that, because those are options that are available to you. Getting a podcast cover logo and all, going through the podcast, getting my podcast a trademark, like that process, I never would have thought. So anyway, I went all in, and it can be expensive. But what I'm learning along the way is that expensive doesn't always mean good. And I really want people to hear me when I say that. It's like expensive doesn't always mean good, because part of the learning how to edit podcasts is not something that I, would have thought would have been on my resume. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you and tell you. But I've learned to be decent enough at it to be able to do it when necessary. But the other thing it taught me is that it's not something that I want to do often. So when I am recording my podcasts, okay, that it means that I do things differently during the course of my podcast that help me, should it come time to edit. And so it taught me how to be a better podcast host with an editor's mind frame. And so those are some things that you just aren't going to know when you begin down this path. But I've enjoyed every single bit of it. And now I have skills. I got skills, y'all.
Dr. Henderson, did you want to share? Can you hear me? Yes, did you want to share, or I can move on to the next question? It's up to you.
Oh, yes. I think the only thing I'd add is, just know, again, it's all about knowing where you are. When I started out, I used my iPhone and I sat in my car and recorded on my phone and uploaded it to some free trial of something that I had and put it on. I just needed to get it done. So I just put it on Apple Podcasts and was like, oh, I got a podcast. But no, that goes to testing mics and getting the right computer, like a Mac, testing out different softwares. Because I didn't know about Anchor, but I knew that I wanted to do something different. Or in the beginning, I didn't even podcast regularly. So I was like, I have a podcast and it's just there sitting, but it's like nothing that's happened for 3 or 4 months. So just thinking about consistency, and like I said, to what Dr. Anderson said, what it looks like, for you over time. And with equipment, get what you need to get started. Just start. That's really the big thing. Just start. But even at this point now, I don't and have not in over 2.5 years edited my own show. And I refuse to do it because I just feel like where I am, I don't have time. So I have outsourced my podcast editing. I actually have 2 audio engineers and I use them for different projects. But it's really helpful to send them everything. And I have somebody who does my show notes for me. I have an assistant. She uploads my show. She does my website. Everything for me for my podcast is outsourced, even my intake process. So over time, decide what you want to invest in to make things easier for you, if it is easier. Because I think with the help that I've had has allowed my podcast to grow rather than me trying to do it myself. And I don't knock anybody who does it themselves, but I think there is you got to know what you're gifted at. And podcast editing ain't my gift. So I'm just going to let it go. So those are my 2 or 3 cents for getting started, but how you can evolve. And if your show takes on a life of its own, which mine really did, which is part of the reason why I did decide to invest, it's definitely worth it, especially if it helps your business reach part of its bottom line. Because I started to book more speaking engagements when I also took my podcast more seriously. So for me, it is a part of my business marketing plan.
I think
I feel you have. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Anderson.
I was just going to say, I think that's a really, really good, solid point. And it's the same. It's like people who are your listeners. I think sometimes we assume that we know who our listeners are. And I was really surprised when I got the metrics back. So I moved from Anchor to Buzzsprout because they just had more options that I thought were really beneficial to me. And so the metrics that I got back were like my listeners were these 2 distinct groups. And it was so funny and weird and kind of unusual because they were 18 to 25. And then there was this jump to 35 to 50. And I'm going, well, what happened to the 25 to, I don't know why they're not listening to me though. But so I had the very young and the seasoned. And so that was some interesting information, but it also helped me to sort of key in on the piece that was missing. The other part of that is that the longer you do it, you see where it has the potential to go. And so for me, it led to me, booking some speaking engagements or being asked to be a part of some conferences, and not only just for me, but like for the guest on my show, because I'm always really clear that I don't like, while I feel like I'm blessed to be the host of the show and get to meet a lot of women of color who are brave enough and to tell their story. This is a gift for them, right? And for my audience. And I really want that to be clear to my audience. Like, this is not something that Dr. Tasha is doing because she want to be famous. But I do know that there's a benefit to what I'm doing. And that is why I go hard for it. That's why I put revenue into it. That's why, revenue comes to me, but I'm always pouring back in. I want to have the best sound because I want people to hear their stories. I want my logo to be representative of who the audience is so they can see themselves and want to be a listener, right? So everything has been really, I think I've really thought about who my audience is and how I want them to be represented. And all of that is pushed into the whole overall experience. So I think that's important also.
And I think you all three have touched on something that when people come to me and go, how did you start your podcast? So the same way I learned how to swim, except for my daddy didn't throw me in. Like, I learned I'm a country girl and I learned how to swim. We're at the pool. We were at the lake. And my dad was like, why you don't play with the kids? And I was like, huh. And he just like threw me in. And I was like, oh, I do know how to swim. Driving the car. I'm a country girl. I was driving at 13 to the grocery store to get breakfast. And I was like, my dad was like, drive my truck. And I was like, that's a stick shift. He looked at me like, you watch me drive a stick shift all your life. And I was like, that's not the same. But podcasting is like that. Like, I have people go, what's the best time to start a podcast? Now. Just go ahead and start it. And I know several of it. I know for me, I said, okay, by the time my birthday comes, I should have this many episodes out or this many episodes recorded. And like several of you, I know, especially like Carlos, I taught myself. Dr. Anderson, I did not go that deep into it because when I started teaching myself, Dr. Hudson, I started outsourcing. So I'm all three of you because I was like, I didn't have time. I don't want to learn how to do this. I did my immediate social media assets because that's something I love. But I was sitting here and looking at the wave pattern and trying to add the music and make it smooth like I'm the DJ. No. So it's okay. And if you listen to my podcast, I know that people can tell she outsourced this or she did this one by herself. Like, what was she thinking? And where are all the people? So it is, let me see, it's 4:41. So I do want to do, if we have anyone in the audience, you have any questions about podcasting and education, how to start, where do you go, any information, because you have three experts and then me, that I will try and help you. And we will try and help you as much as we can. And I'm gonna listen. I know y'all were in the chat talking about Mac, and I was like, are they talking about makeup? Or are they talking about computers? Okay. All right, so you're talking about makeup, computers, not makeup. Because I was like, I've been cleaning my room. There's no makeup on. But I do want to wrap up with just saying, I love it. I do want to wrap up, and I want everyone to close out. And I want you to tell me how has podcasting changed your life? And when I say life, it can be your personal life, or it can be your life as a business entrepreneur in education. How has it? I'm giving you a moment, and I'm gonna tell you how it's changed mine. Wait, hold on to that. I want to answer this. This is a good one. What is your tip for growing your audience? So I'm gonna pause on my question because I really, really want to answer this question. Thank you, Tracy. What is one tip? And we're going to go around. Even if we don't get to my question, I'm okay with that. What is your tip for building your audience? And I'm going to go backwards this time. So I'm going to go Dr. Hudson, Aponte, Mr. Aponte, and then Dr. Anderson, and we're going to go backwards and answer that question.
Great question, Tracy. One, go where your audience may be on social media. And two, deliver content to your audience that they want, not what you want, because you think it's a cool idea, but give them what they want. I guess it's with any business, because podcasting is still very much so, depending on how you look at it, a business thing, right? To be successful, knowing your audience. So Dr. Anderson talked earlier about looking at her statistics, her analytics, and seeing who those persons were, or, gauge your audience first, right? What do you want to hear? What topics do you like? Pay attention to what's being downloaded, what people were just like, I ain't got time for it. But even with the social media space, my group is on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Clubhouse, not Twitter. I don't waste my time. And so, also know how to promote to them if they want guests or not. So really know your audience. Like any business, you got to know who your target is and give them what they want, and they'll keep coming back. So that's probably the best advice I could give you as well.
Carlos, do you have any advice?
Yeah, exactly everything Dr. Hudson said. And then if you have the time, which this is just going to lead over to whatever, I know a lot of people use podcasting as a marketing wing of their business, but not only just knowing where your audience is, but building that community, right? Turning your audience into a community, interacting with them, holding events for them, letting them feel as if they are part of the creation. The creation would not happen without them. And that, I think, is what everyone is very much craving, is that community.
Ditto. No, yeah, I mean, everything that Dr. Hudson and Carlos have said is exactly what you need to do. I really want to reiterate that you have to give them what they're looking for, and then be consistent. Consistency is really key. I learned that one the hard way. I just had a random person. I say random, no, nobody's really random, but I didn't know this individual shoot me a private or a DM in LinkedIn. It was just like, I've been searching for your podcast. And when I first started, I've been searching for it. It was good, but I don't know when to expect it. And I was like, right. So that message got me to really consider, can I be consistent at delivery? So people know every Tuesday, when you open up Spotify, you're going to see a new episode from Stemming and Stilettos with Dr. Tasha. You know it because I've been consistent in it. And so that was really key in helping to grow my audience, and then coming to understand who my audience is. I got it. An 18 to 25-year-old, they need consistency. And same thing with a 35 to 50-year-old. Like they're not going to search for too long. They'd be like, forget it. Either one of those groups is like, forget it. So I had to, one of those moments where you have to decide, like, is this something I'm going to invest in? And can I do it with that level of consistency? Really helped me to grow my audience.
Can I add really quick to what Dr. Tasha said? Because you got me going when you said the consistency part, because I told you I was January, maybe March, maybe 1 November in the very first year. But I had as well somebody who was listening to the show. She was like, you should do it every week. Great, and lost your mind. If I do this every week, it's a lot of work. Who gonna do this? But the every week is she was looking for, because she was, I'm in my car. And she's like, and I love listening to podcasts. And I was like, I'll try it out. But to do this every week, I'm going to need help. This is no way I can do this by myself every week. And then the creative in the content. And are you going to recycle your content? Are you going to take a show and re-air it? Like, what do you do with these things? But that every week, but then also how long. You want to build an audience, and you think doing 2-hour show is going to work, and your audience is like, give me 15 minutes, I'm good. You really have to know, because you can't grow an audience and like, this is just too much of a show. I'm not listening to this. And so even the timing of it, and I think the average show, like the average listenership is 22 minutes, right? So when you push that to 22 minutes, unless you just got some grand topic or some grand guest setup, right? Really be mindful of that is more really necessary, because it can turn people off and make them say, I'm not listening because that's too long. And I'll be honest, I've done that with some shows. I don't have time. I'm just trying to wash the dishes and listen to a show. Y'all giving me too much. So that's really what it is there.
So I will say that I was all excited for one of the Obama's podcasts to come out. And then I was like, no. It just, I couldn't, I was like, I don't think I'm the right audience. This, I may not be in that spectrum that you're trying to talk to. It was too long. I was bored. I was like, who's doing this? Like, I know people who can produce your show, sir. What's going on? Ma'am, I don't want to say which one, sir or ma'am. One of them. It wasn't the daughters, and the dogs don't have one. So, but I mean, and I'm saying that because Dr. Anderson said, I'll put it in the chat, just because what is it? Just because it's expensive doesn't make it taste good. I don't know.
Just because it's expensive, that means it's good.
Yeah.
Just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's good. And that's what I thought about. And then when Dr. Hudson said, I said, because I was just like, I'm all excited. I'm looking for the consistency. And I was like, okay, so this is not the podcast for me. And that's okay. And I want to wrap up here. Wait, we have one more question. We're going to throw that in there. Yeah, that's where I'm going. Thank you. That's why we're here. So here's the question, because that was my wrap up, because I threw the other question out the window, because I was like, let me get some questions. How can your podcast be used as a learning tool by students or their teachers, K-12 or higher ed? Because that's how we're going to wrap up. I'm going to tell you this. I use it now to prepare my students about what we're going to read about. So I know coming into the first one, we're doing social emotional. So there are some podcasts I have lined up just to talk to my students so they can hear about coming back into the school building, about understanding where we are in our third school year in a pandemic. But then I also use it, we're reading A Long Walk. Oh my gosh, it's gone there, but we're reading about the Sudanese young men. And there's a podcast I want them to listen to about being a refugee, because my American students do not understand that concept. So for me as a teacher, I'm like, oh wait, I don't just have all of us can listen to these podcasts. I can assign it, even if I can, shorten it and say, okay, go from here to here. I can assign that as independent in class or as homework to prepare them for the reading and to get them to understand, as we're reading some of the literature that we're not familiar with. So that's me. Y'all, I thought I was on Clubhouse. I was about to be like, that's Benita, and that's all I have to say. So I'm going to open the floor, and then the last person, when you finish, I'm going to wrap up. It's 4:51. So I'm going to say, give us 1 minute, and you answer that question in 1 minute.
You want me to answer in one? Okay. I think my podcast can be used in a myriad of different ways. I mean, we host a lot of different women, minority women. So that in and of itself, don't want to pigeonhole it and put it in one place, but like Black History Month is a great place to showcase and highlight the podcast. But if you are trying to diversify your repertoire of materials, 30 minutes a week, getting introduced to a woman of color in STEM can't hurt anyone, any student, anywhere. I think it should be required listening.
Yeah, I second what Benita says, and it's so many things it can be. And I love that you mentioned the social emotional part. One of the favorite parts of the podcast for the students, and they dubbed it the Trinity of Truths, is, and we actually did this at Venture Cafe to a bunch of people. Thank you for that, Tracy, for letting us be there. But the students ask every podcast guest, if you can go back in time and tell the teenage version of yourself 3 things, what would you tell you and why? And the students are like, it's their favorite part. So yeah, the social emotional piece and the reading and the research and it's just giving them their voice. They get to own the podcast. They're doing the introduction. They're coming up with the music. They want to switch things. And it's like, whatever you want to do. I know I'm in a special category. I use it strictly for an educational tool than like growing it and monetizing it, etc. But yeah, and I'm just blessed to be able to do it because it actually helped me find my own voice when I really started. I had very bad social anxiety. So podcasting is always going to have a special place in my heart.
For me, especially in the higher education space, those who have worked with first gen students in the first year, having listening sessions and having tough conversations or honest conversations about life and using the podcast as a catalyst to open up the door to have those conversations. In professional development opportunities for faculty to talk about first gen issues that maybe they weren't aware of, taking and sequencing and theming the podcast and giving them to those individuals. I encourage a lot of those who are in higher ed spaces to reach out to podcast hosts to be speakers, to be on panels, to do workshops, as well as to tap on their shoulders to do freebies or to be able to offer things that they have as freebies, period, pins, shirts, whatever kind of gifts, you know, to be able to share with their students. Say if I'm trying to do a goodie bag for a first gen student, you can reach out to me. I can send you something, as well as being able to find other guests on shows of guests who talk around your topic. So Dr. Anderson would be great for reaching out for people for STEM. If you're looking for somebody on different STEM topics to help your students find mentors who are in certain industries as well. And I also combine my podcast when we set up curriculum around my book for first year, first gen students for some institutions, and we incorporate a different podcast to go along with that. And then for those in career development, particularly helping conversations with students about how to prepare for life after college and career and life and love and all those things. So many things you can do with it that could be helpful. And I hope I did a minute.
You did a minute. I did not realize that I'm in a different time frame. So I said 4 and people were like, what? It's 4? Sorry, I'm in a different time frame right now, but different time zone. Thank you everyone. And I just want to close with this. Ed tech is new, but it's not new. It's developing and it's progressing and it's moving fast and it's moving swiftly. And as educators, as parents, as community stakeholders, it is our job to ensure that we are infusing it, podcasting in every aspect to make sure our students, our scholars, our neighbors' kids, the kids at the synagogue and the mosque, and if you're in a fraternity, sorority, like all of these children are able, because we want to keep podcasting going. And I love that all 3 of you said, it gives me a voice and an outlet. And I know my audience and I know my listeners, and it's a sense of community. I want to thank everyone. First of all, Venture Cafe, because y'all know y'all are the bosses. Love you guys. We love Philly Ed Tech Takeover, podcasting and education. Our information is there. You can find all of us on LinkedIn and all of us on Instagram. And if you can't find all of us, hit me up and I'll send you to all 3. My name is Benita G. I'm the education concierge. I see Nefertiti in there. That is my partner in crime. Today we split it up. So she did something and I know she's gonna do some more later on. And I'm gonna do this. I'm finishing up this session. Thank you, Natalie. I know Tracy's here, always Nico. Thank you, Emily, Dr. McDonald, we see you. Hey, Brian, hey, John. Thank you so much. And I know she's getting ready for the next session, but y'all enjoy, have a safe weekend. Those of you who are educators, thank you. You are the best thing since sliced bread and we appreciate you.